Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is video number 9 of our Essentials of Negotiation series. Now, I think this one particularly is of interest to just about everyone because it has to do with relationships. And if you really want to be able to understand how to make relationships work both personally and professionally, stay tuned for this video. It's going to be one of our shorter videos, but in here I go over some of the key ideas about relationship management, especially as it relates to negotiations. But as you've probably figured out, we're doing negotiations throughout all parts of our lives as we interact with other people. And so learning how to navigate our relationships as we have conversations and interactions with other people really takes being able to understand, the basics of relationships. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what we've been studying and why some things work and why some things don't work. So I hope you watch this video to the end. Anyway, let's get started and talk about challenges on how relationships and negotiations have been studied at first. So, negotiation really has been studied in two basic ways. One, in live situations, and then two, in simulated negotiations. Simulated negotiations really dominated the research for about 50 years because they're easier to conduct, they have controlled conditions, and it's easier to control data when you're in those types of situations. But there are problems with this approach. Conclusions really are complex, but they come from simple simulations. And then when you're doing these things, there really are no existing relationships in parties. Yet relationships change the negotiation dynamics, and that's why we really have to understand that negotiating in relationships, that's really taking place over time. Negotiation is a way to learn to increase interdependence, and resolution of simple issues has implications that lead to a better future. There are issues within relationships that really could be emotionally hot. And I think if you're an adult, you've probably had some relationships where things didn't go the way they wanted to. And it's probably the hardest part in life is really being able to get along with other people and to work through things with other people. We don't usually get to choose our bosses or our coworkers or especially our family too, right? So we have to learn to be able to manage those relationships. And so negotiating within relationships really doesn't ever end. So you have to be able to learn to lay down a solid foundation, fix things that aren't working right, and then continue to move forward in applying these skills. So that's why I say these are things that you could take into all areas of your life. Relationship preservation really should be the goal. It's sometimes people think of it's an us versus them thing, and it can be, but most of the times if it's the people within the same organization or same family unit or same team, you're negotiating with people that are part of who you are, and so it'd be like cutting off your arm if you wanted to just have a once in a lifetime win. You don't want to lose part of your arm. You want to keep everything whole. And so that should be the goal with negotiations, is be able to manage relationships properly. Uh, we need to really practice being empathetic, being able to understand how things feel, being able to step into someone else's shoes and understand their perspective first, and then be empathetic about it, genuinely caring about other people. A relational identity theory holds that defined group members who use negotiation techniques focusing on issues are likely to fail. It's unclear whether parties in close relationships produce better solutions than other negotiators do. A long-term study of conflict resolution in marriages provides us insights. Successful couples stay positive and say yes often. They embrace conflict as a way to work through differences, and good relationships know not only how to fight, but also how to repair relationships after a fight. Successful couples stress what they like, value, appreciate, and respect about each other. So these are things that can be applied in professional work situations too, right? So some key elements in managing negotiations within relationships. Some things to consider are work A study of work relationships identified 8 key dimensions. So I'm going to give these to you: trust, support, affect, which is your emotion, loyalty, accountability, instrumentality, respect, and flexibility. Some dimensions are critical at the beginning of a relationship, while others are critical as the relationship matures. Trust was the most common and important dimension. Reputations play an important role in shaping relationship development, and justice was also a very important relationship component. Let's talk about reputation then. There are several important aspects of reputation. Reputations are perceived and highly subjective in nature. It's what others actually think of us that count. An individual can have a number of different, even conflicting reputations. It's commonly a single, consistent image, though, and reputations are shaped by past behavior. Reputation is influenced by personal characteristics and accomplishments. Reputations develop over time. Once developed, they're hard to change. Other reputations can shape emotional states as well as their expectations. Negative reputations are difficult to repair. I often say, if you've been in any of my classes or watched my other videos, that relationships are fragile, and it's a lot easier to build and maintain a trusting, positive relationship than it is to fix a broken one. So if you think about the costs of your character, you probably don't want to do, like, I would never rob a bank or steal or kill. We know those are really important values, but if we really focus on building trust as a core value, then we're probably going to be kind. We're probably going to listen more. We're probably going to do the right thing, because all that's related to our relationships, our actions that we choose. And so we build our reputation one moment at a time, one day at a time. And over the years, our reputations precede us, as the saying goes. So we are the only brand managers that we have of our reputation. So we have to guard that and protect it by making sure that our actions are always seen in a positive light, because that will lay down a foundation. And then the glue that holds it together is trust. One definition of trust is an individual's belief in and willingness to act on the words, actions, and decisions of another. 3 things contribute to the level of trust one negotiator or person has for another: the negotiator's chronic disposition towards trust, the individual differences in personality that makes some people more trusting than others, situational factors such as an opportunity for the parties to communicate with each other adequately, and the history of the relationships between the parties. So trust is built through actions, and trust is built through the communication. So being transparent in communication, being kind in the way that we interact with each other, more than anything else, always showing the other person that you have their best interest in mind, I think is really one of the keys to building and maintaining trust. Think about the what's in it for me. That what's in it for me is what's in it for them. And if you've got their back, it makes it a lot easier for them to build and maintain that trust with you. Some recent research on trust and negotiation show that individual and situational antecedents of trust in negotiation. People generally start with high levels of trust, even without data about the situation or the other party. Individual motives shape expectations of trust. Personality differences shape expectations. Emotions contribute to trust or distrust. Situational antecedents of trust and negotiation include the nature of negotiation process, shaping trust expectations. Face-to-face negotiation encourages greater trust development than online negotiation. And then negotiators who are representing other parties' interests tend to be less trusting and less trustworthy than if they are representing their own interests. So these are just things to consider. Recent research on trust also shows that how trust and negotiation work as a process. The focus on different things is amplified by the type of negotiations the parties expect. Trust increases positive turning points around common interests and decreases negative turning points that might deadlock a negotiation around polarization of issues or negative emotions. Outcomes of trust, trust cues with cooperative behavior. Trust enhances the share of information, and greater information sharing generally leads to better negotiation outcomes. Parties who trust tend to communicate by using questions and answers in order to share information and understand the other party's perspective. That thing about understanding is so important in negotiations, is really taking the time to show that you're trying to understand the other person's perspective, because that's value to them, right? So parties who trust less tend to argue for and justify their own preferences and listen less to others. Hence, they're less likely to understand the other party's perspective and more likely to force their view on the other party. So if you use this as a diagnostic tool, you kind of understand why people do what they do. So really be able to take a step back and build and repair the trust really is key. And so let's talk about building trust at the negotiation table. Learn what you can about your counterpart. Reputational information can be helpful, not always accurate. Get to know the person before you formally negotiate, whether you have dealt with the other person or not. Proceed with caution on the other's trustworthiness. You have to kind of give trust to get it, but they may take advantage of your trust. So use safeguards to protect you against errors in judgment. And then win the other person's trust. Trust is earned, right? Make the other understand the cost of major concessions from you, and don't underestimate the value of a concession on their part. Listen to acknowledge the other's concerns. Acknowledging emotions may be done, of the most part, by effective listening as a vehicle for building trust. One of my favorite things to do is, you look upset about this. What is it that you're upset about? Can you help me understand that? I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. Did you say this? And did you mean because of this? Being able to say things in a way that helps show the other person that you're trying to understand them and that you are listening to them, and asking clarifying questions. These kinds of things can help build trust. And it makes it easier to have some give and take when you have those levels of trust. And if there's levels of trust that are broken, you have to do the work. So let's talk about trust repair. There are three major strategies that a trust violator can use to repair trust. Verbally address intent with apologies, explanations, and accounts. I'm sorry that I did this. I didn't realize that I was doing this, but I can see now that this was hurtful when I said this, or this feels like when I said this, you took it this way, and I apologize to you. I should have said it this way. I'll be more careful about that. Being able to really express that you understand what happened and that you're not going to do it again. Your apology could include an expression of regret, an explanation, an acknowledgement, taking responsibility, declaration of repentance. I'm so sorry, I'll never do that again. An offer to repair the impact. That was my fault. I owe you this. And then a request for forgiveness. I am so sorry. Would you please forgive me for doing that? I can do better. Reparations are really important too. If there's a cost to someone else, payment of the compensation to the victim for the consequences suffered really kind of helps build trust. The amount of money offered is less critical than the offer itself. Structural solutions make effort to create rules, regulations, and procedures to minimize the likelihood of a violation in the future. And then rules and procedures can be strengthened by also creating fines and penalties for rule violations. So those create some equity, right? So justice is really an important thing that we psychologically seek, and it comes in several different forms. Distributive justice is about the distribution of outcomes. Procedural justice is about the process of determining outcomes. Concerns about procedural fairness arise when negotiators are judging the behavior of third parties. Interactional justice is about how parties treat each other in one-on-one relationships, and people have strong expectations about their treatment, and when those standards are violated, parties feel like they're being treated unfairly. Systemic justice is about how organizations appear to treat groups of individuals and the norms that develop for how they should be treated. When groups are discriminated against or disenfranchised, they may think the system is biased. Let's talk a little bit more about research conclusions on justice and fairness. Involvement in the process of shaping negotiation strategies increases commitment to that strategy and willingness to pursue it. Procedural justice appears to impact the way negotiators approach the negotiation process. Negotiators encouraged to think about fairness where more cooperative and distributive negotiations. Parties who receive offers they perceive as unfair may reject them out of hand, even though the amount offered may be better than what's in their BATNA. Remember we talked about in their BATNA. That's the what I'm choosing, what my ideal expectation is. Establish some objective standards of fairness as a positive impact on negotiations and satisfaction with the outcome. Judgments of fairness are subjective to cognitive biases. Egocentric biases vary across different cultures. Relationships among reputation, trust, and justice. They all interact with shaping the expectations of the other person's behavior. It's this give and take. We have so much power over other people, we don't even realize how we may be causing the problems with other people by not navigating relationships effectively. When one party feels that the other has acted fairly in the past, or will act fairly in the future, they're more likely to trust each other. Conversely, when parties are unfairly treated, they often become angry and retaliate against the other in injustice and those who are seen causing it. And trust, justice, and reputation are all central to relationship negotiations, and they feed each other. Repairing relationships, I've mentioned relationships are fragile. And talk through questions to identify problems and then improve the relationship. What might be causing any present misunderstanding, and what can I do to understand it better? What might be causing a lack of trust? What can I do to begin to repair trust that might have been broken? What might be causing one or both of us to feel coerced, and what can I do to put the focus on persuasion rather than coercion? What might be causing one or both of us to feel disrespected, and what can I do to demonstrate acceptance and respect? And then finally, what might be causing one or both of us to get upset, and what can I do to balance emotion and reason? We are all emotional creatures. We need to learn to manage our biases and our perceptions and be emotionally intelligent. Recognize the emotions that are there, call out the emotions that are there, be able to manage our relationships by the way that we say things and show that we genuinely want to work things out and that we want the best for the other person, but it's got to be a win-win relationship and have win-win outcomes. So that in a nutshell is about 20 minutes of information about relationships and negotiations. Again, these are concepts that can be applied in all areas of your life. It doesn't have to be in a formal workplace negotiation. Relationships are fragile, and how we build and maintain trust and justice and mutual respect really is in a large part about how we manage ourselves. So I hope that's been helpful to you, and more than anything else, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.